The air hangs heavy with the scent of ozone and the ghost of stale nicotine, thick enough to chew. Dust motes dance in the single neon tube, humming a bruised violet as the war surplus transmitter thrums a low, stubborn heartbeat. Hand-labeled vinyl records stack like forgotten histories beside a console patched with kente tape and salvaged brass.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
Across Liberdade, the dial sits at 74 Fahrenheit under sunny. Winds are moving from the north-northwest at 11 miles per hour. Coffee's cold. Doesn't matter. The signal is warm and the board is reading clean.
Debrief like designers. Log the friction, script a small rule bend, and try it live.
Let it travel. Make the handoff narrative friendly. Title, time, stakes, and what good looks like.
One lever at a time. Change less, learn more. Then we can argue about it with actual numbers.
First up, the UK braces for a new political era, with incoming Prime Minister Andy Burnham facing immediate structural economic divides.
Burnham inherits a UK economy where inflation, currently at 8.7%, continues to outpace wage growth, impacting over 2.5 million low-income households. His government faces immediate pressure on the National Health Service, with a record 7.4 million people on waiting lists for treatment. The core challenge is navigating persistent regional disparities, with productivity in the Northwest still lagging 15% behind London. A direct move would be to push for a rapid interest rate hike to curb inflation, but that risks stalling growth further. A viable alternative: implement a targeted regional investment fund, perhaps £5 billion over 3 years for Northern Powerhouse 2.0 infrastructure projects, alongside a national living wage increase to £12.50 by 2024. The chosen next move, based on early signals, appears to be a mixed approach. A modest tax reform package aiming to raise £15 billion from higher earners, coupled with a promise to stabilize public services through efficiency drives, rather than radical investment.
This feels like the old industrial towns, where the factory whistle dictated the rhythm, but now the whistle is digital, signaling economic precarity. Who carries the weight? The families in communities like Bolton or Barnsley, trying to stretch a shrinking pay packet. The memory of the miners' strikes, where solidarity was forged in struggle, might resurface as local councils grapple with funding cuts. It's a landscape etched with the ghosts of lost industries, demanding a new kind of social contract.
Lex, Anansi points to a historical echo of struggle. Is Burnham's stabilization strategy truly a structural fix, or does it merely postpone the reckoning, much like patching over a hairline fracture in a load-bearing wall?
Togee, the data suggests it's a short-term pressure release. While a £15 billion tax reform might provide some fiscal breathing room, the underlying issues of productivity gaps and NHS capacity require sustained, generational investment. We're seeing forecasts from the Office for Budget Responsibility that suggest even with this package, public debt as a percentage of GDP could continue to rise, potentially reaching 100% by 2028 under current spending plans. The efficiency drives often translate to further cuts in frontline services, impacting precisely those low-income households and vulnerable patients Anansi mentioned. A truly structural fix would involve a fundamental reevaluation of public service funding models and a devolution of economic power, rather than just central government tinkering.
Lex, it's about the soul of the architecture. Stabilization without structural repair is just holding your breath. The dignity of work, the provenance of community, these aren't line items in a budget. When the economic signal is tighten your belt, but the structural reality is the floor is crumbling, people hear a different story. They hear that their self-worth, their very place in the civic architecture, remains contingent on external, often distant decisions.
From a design perspective, stabilization without explicit structural reinforcement is a temporary measure. It's deferring a necessary redesign.
Patching in a caller, the boundary keeper. You're on the signal.
Togee, if Burnham prioritizes stabilization, who truly pays the long-term cost? for deferring deep structural changes in healthcare and regional investment? Is it the patient waiting years for surgery, or the next generation inheriting greater national debt?
That question of long-term cost and structural integrity echoes across diverse landscapes, from national economies to fragile ecosystems. Speaking of which, our attention shifts to an unexpected biological intrusion in the Philippines. In the Philippines, human intervention is blurring ecological lines as hybrid fish threaten native biodiversity in a vital lake.
Scientists are reporting a significant integration of hybrid tilapia, specifically a cross between Oreochromis niloticus and Oreochromis mosambicus, into Lake Taal's delicate ecosystem. These hybrids, originally bred for aquaculture, are outcompeting native species like the Sardinella tawalis, the only freshwater sardine in the world, whose population has seen a 30% decline in catch data over the last 5 years. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources and local fishing communities around Batangas province are directly exposed to the ecological and economic fallout. One immediate alternative would be to implement a strict, localized culling program targeting the hybrid species in specific zones of the lake, coupled with public awareness campaigns to prevent further release. Another path is to establish protected breeding areas for Sardinella tawalis using net enclosures. The chosen next move, as communicated by the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, BFFR, is primarily a monitoring strategy combined with community education on responsible aquaculture practices rather than aggressive intervention, hoping to understand the full genetic impact before large-scale action.
This is a classic tale of unintended consequences, a modern-day disturbing the natural order by inviting a stranger into the home. For the Togee people, Lake Taal is not just a body of water, it's a living larder and a sacred space. This hybrid integration feels like a corruption of provenance, threatening the very identity of the lake and its people. It's a reminder that even the smallest unintended action can unravel the delicate weave of an ecosystem.
Lex, the BFAR's cautious monitoring approach seems to be weighing against aggressive intervention. But when we talk about genetic integration, isn't the architectural signal for irreversible change often quite subtle until it's too late? What are the risks of waiting?
Togee, absolutely. The risk of waiting for full genetic impact is the potential for an ecological tipping point, where the hybrid population becomes so dominant that restoring native balance is either impossible or astronomically expensive. Studies on invasive species show that early decisive intervention has a far higher success rate. For Lake Taal, if Sardinella tawalis populations continue to decline, it's not just an ecological loss. It's an economic disaster for the estimated 6,000 fisherfolk families who depend on it. Moreover, these flower-horn cichlids are known carriers of parasites, including some capable of infecting humans, adding a public health dimension to the environmental threat. The longer the delay, the more entrenched the problem becomes, making any future culling program exponentially more difficult and potentially less effective.
And the deeper the wound to the cultural architecture. For the Togee Taal, the tawalis isn't just a fish, it's a symbol of their unique heritage, a living testament to the lake's spirit. To lose it means losing a piece of their collective memory, their story. It's a quiet violence against their provenance, a forced redesign of their very identity. The lake, once a source of abundance and wonder, now carries the shadow of an alien presence.
From an ecological design perspective, the principle is clear. Early detection, rapid response. Delay is a design flaw.
Call is on. Go ahead.
So the BFAR is choosing monitoring over intervention. Who bears the cost if these hybrid fish irrevocably alter the lake's genetics and drive the tawalis to extinction? Is it the local fisherfolk losing their livelihood or the entire planet losing a unique species?
The integrity of ecosystems and the integrity of democratic systems both demand sharp discernment. Our next story highlights how external influences can reshape internal architectures, this time in the political sphere. Next, we examine a transatlantic funding move. The Trump administration's reported $12 million grant to groups linked to prominent UK conservatives, raising questions of influence and sovereignty.
Reports indicate the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, is preparing to grant $12 million to two think tanks. The Council on Geostrategy, co-founded by Jacob Rees-Mogg, and the Free Speech Union, founded by Togee. This funding, purportedly for promoting democratic values abroad, would channel U.S. taxpayer money to groups actively influencing UK domestic policy, particularly on issues like Brexit and cultural debates. The move exposes USAID to accusations of political interference and raises questions about the impartiality of U.S. foreign aid. It also puts Rees-Mogg and Young under scrutiny for accepting foreign funds that could be seen as attempts to shape the UK's political discourse. An immediate alternative for USAID would be to reallocate these funds to nonpartisan, established international development organizations, or to bolster genuinely independent investigative journalism efforts in developing democracies. Another path could be to fund US-based organizations focused on global democratic resilience, thereby avoiding direct foreign political entanglement. The chosen next move, according to administration sources, is to proceed with the grants, framing them as legitimate support for Atlanticist intellectual endeavors, despite the clear partisan affiliations.
This feels like an old colonial game, just with different players and currency. The idea of an invisible hand guiding policy from across the ocean, using cash as a lever, is a narrative as old as empires. It makes you think of the East India Company, or whispers in Westminster corridors, where foreign interests once held sway over domestic fate. Who carries this next? Any UK citizen who believes their political landscape should be shaped by local consent, not external injections. This isn't diplomacy, it's a financial Trojan horse, arriving with the promise of values, but carrying the cargo of specific political agendas.
Anansi, you speak of a financial Trojan horse. Lex, when foreign money directly funds partisan think tanks, how does this specifically erode the civic architectures that favor consent and dignity? What's the long-term toxic residue of such a move on democratic provenance?
Togee, the erosion is multi-layered. Firstly, it creates a perception, if not a reality, that domestic policy debates can be bought or steered by external actors, undermining public trust in the impartiality of political discourse. USAID's mandate is typically development aid, not partisan political funding in allied nations. This move sets a dangerous precedent, potentially inviting reciprocal interference or accusations of hypocrisy from the U.S. Secondly, it elevates voices that might not otherwise gain such significant financial backing, distorting the organic marketplace of ideas. It normalizes a transactional view of international relations, where influence is directly purchased, rather than earned through diplomacy and shared values. This can lead to a long-term cynicism about the democratic process itself, making citizens question whose interests are truly being served.
And that cynicism is the ultimate toxic residue, Lex. It's the slow poison that eats away at the unwavering autonomy of a nation's collective psyche. When the signal from your own government is mixed with static from foreign cash, the clarity of democratic consent becomes murky. It tells the people that their dignity, their self-determination can be pawned off for political gain. It's a subtle but profound violation of provenance, suggesting that their future isn't solely theirs to design. The architecture becomes compromised, not by force, but by a gilded whisper.
From an architectural ethics standpoint, transparency of funding is fundamental to structural integrity. Hidden influence creates invisible stresses.
Lines open. Patching in a caller. Go ahead.
So, $12 million from U.S. taxpayers to shape UK policy. Beyond the obvious political optics, what's the actual cost to democratic provenance when foreign money directly funds partisan think tanks within an allied nation? Is it an erosion of trust in the electoral process, or just the price of global influence?
That question of democratic provenance is central to building resilient civic architectures that truly favor consent and dignity. Whether it's economic policy, ecological balance, or international funding, discerning the architectural signal from the toxic residue requires constant vigilance.
Play the next move.
Black Star Pirate Radio.
Continue the signal at TogeeVision.com. Tune in, Sparks and Stories, Gig Passport.